So hello. Today I'm going to tell you about the burden setting in a debate. So in debate, a big characteristic of this is that it should always be fair, and it should always provide fair grounds for both sides. And this might not, and you might not understand what this means in the first place, but to elaborate on, this means like government, which is the proposition opposition, should both have a should both be on a side that should be arguable. For example, if the for example, motions should never be something that's undebatable. So emotions should never be facts. For example, motions can't be something like this house believes that killing a person is good because that is the fact that killing a person is bad is a fact, is something undebatable. So that's why debate should always be on fair grounds, and it should always provide fair burdens for both sides. But then there are mainly like four ways in debate how you can push your unfair burden to your opponents, but this is a very bad strategic move. So never do this. You can never win using these four strategies. So number one is something called squirreling. So squirreling is basically when you go to a debate tournament, you go to a debate and you define the motion so that it's going to unfairly benefit you. For example, if it's like would this house supports euthanasia. I don't know how to spell it. You should always define euthanasia as Alexa. It shouldn't be something else, because if it's something else and you define it as something like maybe there could be a game called euthanasia and then you define euthanasia as that game, then it's undebatable because that's not the spirit of the motion. And second way is to have a specific time or place setting. And sometimes this can be allowed when the motion says so, but in a lot of cases you shouldn't do this because when you set the motion in a specific time or a specific place, your opponents might not know what that place is and what happened at that timeline. So it's very unfair for your opponents to debate when you have much more knowledge compared to that person and when that information is not general knowledge. So again, for example, let's use the this house supports euthanasia example. Like in this debate, generally this house should be the liberal democratic nations. That liberal democratic nations that euthanasia is illegal. You shouldn't define this house to somewhere like East Timor, because even though you have a very good understanding of the incidents that happened regarding euthanasia in East Timor, your opponents might not know it, and because it's not general knowledge that you should know, you shouldn't set the time and space in those kinds of places. And second thing you should never do is something called tourism. As you can see in the name, tourism is when your logic is based on the truth. So, for example, if the motion is like this house would stop all efforts for South Korea's reunification. In the current status quo, actually, the constitution of South Korea says that South Korean government should try to reunify with North Korea. But then that shouldn't be our first argument because this debate itself exists to change that part of the constitution. It exists to change the government. So your logic shouldn't be based on the status quo and it shouldn't be based on facts, but it should be based on logic and something that you can conclude from like logic or legal statements or whatnot. And then the fourth thing you should never do is tautology. And in other words, this is also called circular logic. And for example, if the emotion is this house believes that terrorism can be justified, if you set terrorism as something that can be justified, and then if you say that is a reason why terrorism should be justified, that is circular logic. Your definition proves why you're right. And in that case, because that is impossible to rebut for your opponents, this should also not be used. So basically, these are the things that you should never do in a debate, and these are the things that are basically the unfair burden settings to your opponents and something that should be never done. And if you do this, you're going to, in a lot of cases, automatically lose. So thank you.